Okay, good evening, Anna. I'm going to jump right into this presentation of the leadership theory that I chose to summarize. And the one that I picked is leader-member exchange theory, partially because I think that it was one that interests me most with the whole in-group and out-group relationship. And then also because there's also some interesting parallels that I discussed in my management class in regards to it. So I'm going to dive right in. So according to Peter G. Nordhaus's Leadership Theory and Practice text published in 2016, LMX theory can be described as the relationship between vertical dyads as two general types of relationships, those that were based on expanded and negotiated role responsibilities, which are called in-groups, and then those that were based on the formal employment contracted, which are known as the out-groups. So the benefit to being in the in-group, as Nordhaus notes, is that, quote, the in-group receives more information, influence, competence, and concern from their leaders than do the out-group followers, which comes from Nordhaus, again, published in 2016. So already right there in this introduction piece, we have some pretty interesting topics to dissect. So then if we read further, though, into the chapter, the effect of the LMX theory in later research studies is that, quote, researchers found that the high-quality leader-member exchanges produced less employee turnover, more positive performance evaluations, higher frequency of promotions, greater organizational commitment, and more desirable work assignments, better job attitudes, and more attention/support from the leader, unquote, or unquote, again from Nordhaus 2016. So the last component of this theory is going to be the three phases that you would attain to become in the in-group, which is that stranger, acquaintance, and partnership. So I'll get to describing those a little later. And in my management class, we actually discussed this theory that it presents the fact that a leader is not going to get along with everyone. So as mentioned before, already with this introduction, we are definitely starting to see some favoritism that is happening. We're definitely starting to see some added benefits to being involved in the in-group. And then, but what we're concerned with, obviously, in this course, as we've been doing, is dissecting how those benefits are distributed in why are they being chosen and selected over other individuals. So in regards to the ways my theory can reflect particular ethical principles, stocks of knowledge, ideologies, and hegemonic norms, okay, stumbled through that one, and other social locations. In terms of the application, I found that the LMX theory presents the difficult ethical principle and the idea that, quote, it supports the development of privileged groups in the workplace, unquote, by Nordhaus 2016. So in class, we have really discussed heavily the idea of privileged, and this theory I think is a literal representation of personal privilege that the leader holds, and that how they distribute the membership into the in-group, and the benefits that they are giving to those individuals rather than the folks in the out-group. And so the way that I want to apply this theory is through a business standpoint, just because that is something that I've been actively studying. So that will be an ongoing example throughout this presentation. So a common stock of knowledge that I associate with this theory is that people tend to view the in-group as like the senior level management team. So one thing is that imposed on society is this act of ingratitude, or like another form of flattery, but that's associated with joining the in-group. To me, I think climbing the corporate ladder through this process of, kissing up, in layman's terms, if you will, is an ingenuine way of promotion instead of analyzing work performance. I think through a lot of the times, it's discussed in different interview settings that you want to be, you want to flatter the individual, you want to see what they admire and really play to their strengths and play to what they're looking for, in a sense of appealing to their personal side, rather than sometimes if you feel like that your professional standpoint or your professional work experience isn't going to really meet the standard that they're looking for, is that you just go straight to kissing up to their personal lives. I think it was interesting because in my management class, we also discussed that in a job interview, you want to be, the text that we read said that you want to be more focused on self-promotion rather than flattery, because the interviewers could see right through that. excuse me, I had that the opposite. In a job interview, you want to be more, you want to flatter rather than you self-promote. But then in a work quarterly review, you want to self-promote more than you flatter. So I think it's interesting that once you get your foot in the door, or how you get your foot in the door is you please, 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 but then how you stay in the door is you prove that what you're worth. So I think to continue on, the hegemonic assumption associated with LMX theory is that in-groups are comprised of middle-class, white, heterosexual, cisgender males, placing the minority identities in the out-group. I think that we observed this examples in class and the case study activities that we did revolving around the different board members and employees engaged in conflict with trying to have their voice heard despite their viewpoint from their colleagues. I think that was an interesting activity that you had us do, and it really represented individuals placing someone's identity over their work ethic and really just having that blind the way that they view their performance. So going in kind of like the meat and potatoes, I guess, of this presentation is the two tools of deconstruction that I want to focus on. So through ideological critique, I want to question the underlying core belief. Or the purpose is to question the underlying core belief of a theory, attempting to identify what is positioned as normative. So, for example, Nordhaus writes that, quote, in-group members do extra things for the leader, and the leader does the same for them. Followers in the out-group are less compatible with the leader, and usually they just come, do work, do their job, and then go home, end quote. And again, that was published in 2016. So when analyzing this theory, when analyzing that quote, I question the assumption that all members involved with the in-group have worked their way to achieve the extra recognition and work responsibility. Going back to the point I referenced earlier about flattery, I really wonder, are they actually doing sufficient work, or is it just because that the leader really values their personal characteristics and kind of that social camaraderie in the office? But then from a Machiavellian standpoint, I wonder if the leader manipulated the motivation towards the in-group employees so that that leader can then pass down extra work based on, personal interest or just laziness, not wanting to complete tasks, rather than in the goal of the company. So really that once you're in that in-group, how you'll stay in that in-group is, really appealing to the leader's demands in a way, but regardless of ethical lines. So I did some research and I found this really cool article titled "One Member, Two Leaders: Extending Leader-Member Exchange Theory to a Dual Leadership Context." And I'm going to read a quote from it and then talk about it for a little bit. So, communication frequency is especially relevant in our two-organization work context because employees may have relatively fewer means, opportunities, and motives to communicate with their primary leader than those found in a single organization setting. We reason that when LMX with the client leader is subpar, the agency leader emerges as an especially important leader for the focal employees, end quote. And that is Vidhardi, published in 2014. So through a mix of ideological critique and commodification, I want to dissect this piece of data listed, and it has me question the effect of a two-leader LMX system. In my opinion, I think if someone is under the influence of two supervisors with different styles, identities, and goals, it could be easy to switch personalities in order to please the individual who has the most influence to then give that person in the out-group a chance to achieve the status of the in-group, or the person of the in-group to maintain their status in the in-group and then climb up the social ladder. So moving on to another part of the theory, in the three-phase description of becoming part of the in-group, I question the ideological critique of trust. I think it's really important to think who creates trust within the organization, for whom do they create it, and how do different benefit programs or candidate search materials like StrengthsFinder or organizational values reflect the unified characteristics within a group. In an in-group. Additionally, do departments like Human Resources provide a fair evaluation of conduct hearings if a member of the out-group approaches them with a problem with senior management, even though the president signs the checks of the HR manager? Will they be ethical in their decision, or will they have that personal agenda of, wait a minute, I also have to maintain my status in the in-group, so I'm going to have to deny that claim. Through willful blindness, which is my second analytical standpoint, I really want to question how and why people may remain purposefully unaware to avoid responsibility and replicate hegemonic norms. With this tactic, I really question how willfully blind the members of the in-group might be towards the actions of their supervisor. For example, if your boss always approves your vacation time, will occasionally allow you to come to work late, while in return they may ask you to fudge the quarterly numbers a smidge for a large meeting, then the decision to be unethical is weighed against losing the privileges of special treatment that leader is giving to the in-group. So I think another issue with willful blindness is the members of the organization displaced in the out-group. I think the leader and members within the in-group might be so infatuated with one another that they may put up invisible or literal barriers for out-group members, to prevent them from moving up in the ranks. Finally, I think that being socially aware of the breakdown of identities within the outgroup is important, because that way, if you recognize that your outgroup is predominantly marginalized identities, then I think you could come at it from a training standpoint as we really need to diversify who we have on our management team, and the treatment with which we are providing to all employees. So this then stems into the tools of reconstruction. So by reconstructing LMX theory through cultivating agency, I think it creates a collective feeling of collective efficacy as a central purpose to leadership. So like in a nonprofit setting, for example, establishing a defined, distinct relationship between the board of trustees, who would be the in-group, and the staff members, who would be the out-group, is necessary for company policy, for legal matters. However, I think it allows for each group to work independently with their respected teams while collectively working for the same common goal. So through building insurance convergence, on the other hand, it is important to recognize the effects of oppression, empathize with one another, and then work together through a cultivated agent to break down the hegemonic norms within the in-group so that more members of the out-group are included. A way I've seen this be applied is on various committees at Loyola. For example, each committee likes to have a mix of faculty, staff, and students, and so sometimes that student role can really just be seen as a box to check in order to meet the requirement. However, a situation in which my friend was placed in, she spoke out to her committee when they kept scheduling their meetings during her class time to remind them of her importance and voice on the committee. She urged them to include her in the physical meetings because her opinion had value to the discussion points. The committee eventually listened, and then they allowed her to become a part of the in-group and speak her voice at meetings. So I think discussing how this reconstructed theory better reflects notions of ethics and social justice, I think that once, it's so easy for us to break down the norms and really pick apart what's wrong with these different theories. With leader-member exchange theory, I think it's super easy to identify that white middle class, stereotypical viewpoint of how we see leadership presented in our society as that in-group, and then everyone else is kind of just clumped in that out-group. But once we deconstruct that, and once we really pick apart the individual pieces, see underlying assumptions, I think that it's easier to put it back together in the sense of, well, we see them all as working together, and in the sense that it's important to always diversify members on different committees with age, identity, in race, gender, sexual orientation, education. That way, you can really get a better representation of a better sample of your population in order to pass initiatives and policies that are fair, that represent the entirety of the organization that you may be working for. And I think that in terms of social justice, it's important to reconstruct the idea that leader-member exchange theory is not just like a catch-all division. It's not like once you're divided and once you're in the out-group, like you're permanently stuck in there. It's the fact that people can be made aware of their decisions, of who they have designated in the in-group, and then given the opportunity to reconstruct the positions and the behaviors and the motivational tactics and the program benefits to make sure that it is viable for everyone to have an interest in the organization or the goal or the project that is in question. So I think that given the entire analysis that I have presented, I think that leader-member exchange theory is one that can cause a bit of issues at first. However, when analyzed and deconstructed and then reconstructed, it really brings together multiple voices and can allow for the reduction of turnover, more positive employee satisfaction, positive work environment, and I think can really reduce absenteeism in the workplace if everyone is given the opportunity to have a chance to be in the in-group. So with that, I I'm going to turn off the recording, and we'll see you tomorrow in class when we actively discuss the results of this election. So hope you have a great rest of your day/afternoon/evening.